أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم من همزه ونفخه ونفثه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So today we're going to start off inshallah again with some check-ins. So give you a second to read it. And we're going to start off with how you've been, how's your week been, anything that you want to talk about, anything that's going on, and then also anything related to assessments. Have you been assessing yourself? What are ways that you're assessing yourself? For example, whatever the field might be, whatever the context might be, but just how are you evaluating yourself? How are you trying to figure out what's going on, where you at, where you are at currently, and things like that. And if you've been doing this, or if you haven't been doing them, what are some things that have been impacting you, or what are some things that you would give in terms of advice to everyone, something that you benefited and so on. So we've been talking about the current status inventory. We talked a little bit about how to take it. I'm going to give you a few more examples of it today, and I'm going to leave it open a little bit for you guys to come up with other ways that you can, other formats, other contexts that you could do inventories. So you can, the more you see the pervasive nature of this in terms of where, how many places you could do this, how many ways you could do it, the easier it then becomes for you to apply it in various contexts. I just want you to get the basic understanding, the framework, the outline, what the intent is, the objective is, and then have some training. Training meaning like some practice, right? Having some practice in terms of applying this in whatever context that you come across. And I want to show the power of it by also, making it clear that it can be applied in so many different places. And it's not that any person, anyone needs to be a master at it. You could just need, if you know the basic framework, the layout, the idea behind it, you're going to be able to move according to that. You're going to be able to apply it in any context. If you're a high schooler, if you're a middle schooler, if you're an elementary schooler, if you're a college student, if you are an adult, a parent, if you're a grandparent, if you're a business owner, if you're an employee, if you are whoever, you're going to be able to apply it in your context. So we discussed this. We went over a little bit about how you can maneuver, and we also mentioned the idea behind it. One of the ideas is to have a baseline so you can know where you're launching off from, right? That starting point. And we mentioned that once you have this, you can do it relative to your vision. You can compare, you can analyze, you can assess how far you are from the vision, what's missing, what you already have, what is something that you need to adjust. All of that stuff can be done once you realize where you're at, right? Okay, so here are some additional inventory formats. And inshallah today we're going to have, I hope, a shorter session, because I'm just going to give you these formats, go a little bit into discussion. And the next thing we're going to do is to have you guys, come up with your own ideas. And then after that, we're done, inshallah. So that's going to be short today. But inshallah, I was thinking about adding case studies for today, but I figured it's going to be too long and it's going to go beyond our time. So I'm going to give them, I'm going to give case studies next time, inshallah, so that we can give each of the case studies their own due time, inshallah. Okay, so in this format, the first one I mentioned is the weekly and family meetings, right? This could be something where weekly or daily family meetings. It could be, for example, you connect on a particular day, let's say Sunday or Saturday, you guys all come together and just talk about how everyone's doing, for things like that. Or you can have a brief daily thing. Let's say you guys are eating together and just kind of talk about what happened each other's day, what happened, what didn't happen, what was good, what was not good, something like that. Just it's sort of like a family connect, right? You just come a sync, you sort of sync with everyone. Everyone sort of says what's going on in their lives and stuff, something like that. Just like we do at the beginning of these sessions. And obviously these are not uploaded online. They get cut out from the recording. before they're uploaded, because we want to, we wanted to make it kind of more personal and like private, um, in terms of like, safe spaces and so on. But nonetheless, this is the idea is that at the beginning of something or like during some time, you can have these kinds of check-ins. And so that's what I mentioned over here also, that you can have check-ins where what you're doing is just figuring out how things are going with the team members that you have. Your family is a team too, so you can check with them. Your friends are part of your overall team, your network, the people that you're around, the support system that you have. All these, you can connect with them. If you are working with youth, for example, you can connect with them individually and say, hey, how's it going? If you are working with, for example, employees, then you can connect with them every once in a while, just for, checking in on how they are personally, right? But you can also check on them in terms of their progress, in terms of what's going on in, if they're having any struggles in their projects that they're working on, whatever it might be, right? So just that check-in, for example, is a type of inventory taking, because you're assessing how things are, right? Even when you say كيف الحال, for example, right? How is everything, right? So in that case, you're asking exactly that. What's going on? How's everything going on? How's everything? How are your kids? How are your families? How are your friends? How is your work? How is whatever? What you're doing is really intending to figure out what's going on in that person's life, and if they need anything, for example, then you can offer it to them. If you feel like this person is going through a difficulty, then you can offer your support. You can also, if you're actually doing this, ongoing, you can also use this constantly to assess if you're doing enough, if you're fulfilling their rights as you should be. If it's your neighbors, for example, and obviously there are certain things that we may not be as good at as other people, but these are certain things that we can definitely improve on. So this is a way to sort of assess that. Are we connecting with our like, for example, your relatives that you haven't connected with for a long time? That could be something that you doing that can help you understand what's going on in their lives. But this is, again, a sort of a connect where you assess how things are currently, right? So various, these are just examples. I just wanted to list a few examples. Obviously, there's a lot more to this in terms of, check-ins and like weekly meetings and stuff like that. If you're at work, for example, you might have certain meetings where the team sort of come together and they discuss what's happening, and then they sort of break away to do their tasks, and then they come back and report, right? You might have shura meetings, for example, that are the same thing. Shura meetings, if they're happening once a month or once a week or whatever it might be, then that's exactly what they're doing. They have individual assignments. They come back. They say, "Here's my update. Here's my update." Everyone comes together and does that, right? So that's the current. That's an assessment of current thing, like progress or whatever it might be. And obviously these are important if you have action items, for example, or if you have, for example, some deliverables and stuff, right? What the progress is on that, that's going to help you in terms of assessing if you're actually making progress toward a certain end goal that you had associated with that. You can also do census, for example. A census, for example, is where you're taking the entire population's sort of data, right? What does that mean? If you're looking at, for example, all the people in the United States, if that's your population, because we're designating what the population is when we're starting our assessment, right? So we're trying to figure out what is the population, and if we designate the entire United States population as that population, then we can continue forward the next step. Now, that means census would then mean that you have to reach out to every single person that's in the United States, right? Or a citizen of the United States, for example, right? If they're traveling overseas, if that's the population, that the citizens of the United States, then in that case, you like whatever it is that you're assessing is going to be done after that. So, for example, maybe you're evaluating the races, like what race a person belongs to. Maybe you're assessing what their income is. Maybe you're assessing where they live. Maybe you're assessing how many kids they have. Maybe you're all that stuff. Whatever it is that you're measuring, but you're doing that for the entire population. That's a census, and it could take a very long time, and it could be like very resource draining, right? Or resource intensive, let's say. On the other hand, surveys are generally more like a sample of the population, meaning a representative group, a subgroup that represents the entire population for the most part, right? So the idea is try to find representative individuals from the entire population that would indicate what's happening at the population level, right? So you might do 100 people out of the 3 million people that are in the country, right? Or 300 million. So if that's a representative population and that's a large enough sample, and it's going to help in terms of statistic significance and validation, then in that case you can continue from there. So surveys are limited to a small group of people that is supposed to be a representation of the general population. This is better in the context of companies that want to launch a product, for example, or a service. So you're getting like an idea of what's happening out there, and they have some statistical measures and procedures through which they're going to be able to identify, for example, that for example, let's say M&Ms want to introduce let's say a purple color, right? And they want to see if the people are going to be okay with it or what the people think about it. So they're going to do a survey and they're going to try to find they're going to get an idea. Okay, 100 people, or let's say 1,000 people responded, and 900 people said yes, and 100 people said no, and that's that, right? So they'll say that based on that, the fact that it's only 1,000 people, but here's how we sort of accounted for randomization, for example. Here's how we tested this, or whatever the procedures are. We are let's say 95% confident, right, that this is a group of people. This is going to work out, right? And they actually have confidence intervals within which the actual number might lie. So they might say, for example, that the actual population mean, or in this case would be for example, the actual proportion of people that in the entire population that like this color to be added in is between this and this boundary, essentially, right? So that'd be the confidence interval. We're 95% sure that the actual number, meaning the population number, is between this number and this number. And so that's the idea with surveys, right? It's supposed to be, so it's not as resource draining or resource intensive, and it's also usually much shorter in time frame, right? And it's a lot easier to carry out in the sense of the resources and the difficulty that goes into it and so on. But obviously, when it comes to just going to people and just asking them directly and go through the entire population, that aspect of it is very easy for census. So it depends on the context and how you do the inventory in these cases. So in this case, census is important to get an actual true reading of what's happening, but then surveys are important in the context where you don't want to spend too much time or money or whatever, right? Imagine if you wanted to, if M&M decides that they want to introduce this purple thing, or the purple color, but at the same time, they want to be absolutely 100% sure that this is exactly what people want, right? So they do the survey or the census of the entire world, like the 7 billion, 8 billion, whatever billion people, right? They do a survey of the entire world. That's going to be extremely resource draining. It's going to be extremely difficult. It's going to take a long time. And it may be that after 5 years or 10 years, when they actually get the result, the amount of effort and the stuff that they put in, right, may not be actually worth it, because maybe the taste of the people, the preference of people actually changed. Now, some people who wanted purple may have died, or maybe a lot of people may have changed their preferences, or whatever it might be. Maybe they don't even want M&Ms anymore and stuff, right? So there's a lot of these things that they need to balance. So it depends on the context. Again, this is still an inventory format. It gives you an idea of how things are today. I'm going to give you an example in a second about the census thing that the government does, the US government does. So you have an idea of what kind of data you can extract from there, and the fact that it happened in the first place. And in fact, the census is not taken every single day. So that's something that, this is what I was trying to address over here, that is so difficult and so broad and so large scale and so resource draining or intensive that they're not going to be able to do it every single day sustainably, right? And even if they did, maybe the stuff that they're going to get out of it may not be as beneficial. It's not worth the extra time and resources and effort that they put in if they did it more frequently. So you have to also look at the incremental benefit out of this, right? Okay. The next thing is bank accounts. Bank accounts, for example, or your investment portfolio, if you're investing in things, for example, is an inventory format. Where do I stand currently, right? If you have certain bills that you need to pay, if you're a business, for example, where is your current income? What is your current income looking like? What's going on in yours today, right? That's another inventory format. People actually take inventory. That's the inventory. what they do is they have these scanners that as soon as like an item comes in, they'll scan it into their system to say this is how many we have, or they'll like sort of like put the number in that okay, we have like 50 items that just came in, so there's 50 new items that were in there. So if you're into taxes, there's a way of accounting where there's like first in first out method where pretty much whatever inventory comes in first, you sell that first, right? And in that case, that's one sort of like the accounting principle. And then there's another one where you might do it differently. So you might say, for example, first in, last out, right? Whatever came in first, you sort of like just put it in the back, and anything that comes in the after that sort of gets added in the front, and then whatever people buy is taken from the front. So there's different things that people use in terms of like figuring out their inventory, their current situation, and so on. So this is going to give you some sort of like immediate, instantaneous picture of where your company, where your personal finances, where your investments, whatever it is, right, currently stands. And again, different reasons, different contexts, different benefits, and so on. Sorry. Okay. Then you have testing. Testing could be, for example, COVID-19 testing to see who's infected, who has some of the so maybe some of them, like they have like let's say they like the person is sick, and then there are certain things that they, for example, the virus appears in the testing. So this person would be like, okay, this person would then be labeled as a person who has either infection or has recently gotten out of infection and there's an inoculation period, or it could be whatever, right? It could also be that your immune system was able to fight off the virus, and so you have certain what's the word? Sorry, my brain is taking a break for a second. What's the word? Antibodies. Yes. Yeah. So like they look in your body because your body, in a very simplistic way. I'm gonna mention it in a very simplistic way. Your body sees an invader, essentially throws stuff at it, and whatever ends up working, right? It starts replicating that. It takes that in its own memory, and then it says, okay, now this is how we defeated this invader, so we're gonna keep using that, right? Just like how military systems work today, right? Just like how anything works, essentially, when it's like a learning platform, right? And if you remember how learning works in our beginning sessions, then you're gonna remember like how we make a line of best fit and so on, right? So in this case, what the immune system is doing is just finding something that actually addresses the issue, locks it in, and says, okay, this worked, let's just multiply it and stuff, right? Now, obviously, in COVID-19, and others, there's a situation, okay, how long does that immunity last? Is it like a permanent, or is it a permanent immunity, or what is it, right? Or, is it like where COVID-19 is a virus, but the influenza virus, the flu virus is also a virus, and it mutates. So maybe COVID-19 is going to mutate very frequently. Is it going to mutate once a year? Is it going to mutate, in the flu season, where it's going to you need a new vaccine, for example, or like a shot, right? Or is it going to be something that's going to change very slowly, or it's not going to change? What's going to happen, right? So this is something that they can determine afterwards. But the idea is testing is going to figure out what the current state of things is. So there are certain websites that were, for example, put up. I think John Hopkins, I think, had one where they were pretty much like populating whatever information that they were getting. WRL was also tracking some stuff from like they were getting the information from the census, let's call it, from the hospitals. Whatever the hospitals had information wise, they would deliver it daily, for example, and then or they would release that information, and then like it would be populated in different news channels, websites, or whatever. So there was like this thing of like making sure that you have that information. And then same thing for example, SAT, where water level, that meant like, for example, seawater, right? So this over here is seawater, but it also can apply for weather. You know how they have like in the weather like designated areas where they do weather research, or like whether like that, like a news channel, for example, has their own department that does like measurements and so on. So they might have something where it measures the water level, right, for the rain. So they'll say, okay, this much rain has accumulated in this time or whatever. And then another thing you're going to look at is, for example, seawater level. Are the oceans, the level of the ocean, like are they rising, right? Is the water level rising? And if it is rising, how fast is it rising? So this is testing. and this is how you're going to be able to sort of connect it. Okay, there's global warming, and the oceans are sort of the polar ice caps are melting and stuff, and so now the water is increasing and so on. So all these things are done to evaluate where we stand currently. You also see, for example, SAT. It is a standardized thing, but the idea is the same, right? In terms of doing your test, just kind of evaluating where a person stands currently. And I noticed I mentioned it's a standardized thing, so it's not a perfect fit, but it is the same concept that you're trying to figure out: is the person essentially, let's say, college ready? Does it actually measure college readiness? That's something up for debate, and that's what's called a construct, right? So this construct of college readiness, and we can define that even more. Like, we'll break it down. What defines what is college readiness, right? What are the components in it? We can define that. Who defines that? All that discussion is separate. But I'm talking about the actual test itself, the objective overall, right? At least what's been mentioned, and that is to assess the person: is the person ready to go or not, right? And if that person does really good on the SAT, then generally the colleges are going to say, oh, okay, this is great. And then likewise for DAT, for the MCAT, for the business exam, for whatever, for the LSAT, for whatever it is, right? Like for the business GMAT or whatever it is. So any test that you take, and then practice tests are also sort of helping you assess yourself where you currently stand in terms of test readiness, right? One of them is like college readiness in the context of SAT, for example, but in the practice tests that you're trying to figure out if you're ready to take the test itself, right? Whereas the test itself might be determining if you're ready for a particular school or college or a higher graduate degree or whatever. And then also grades. Grades, like you get the interim, for example, your teachers give you midterm reports. They also have in school these benchmarks, and the idea is that they have certain measurements. They have defined that a child who goes into second grade, for example, it starts off at these markers. This is a general like measured stuff, right? And this is where the for example, when it comes to like after a certain time or whatever, this is where they're going to end. And so the idea is that you want to measure throughout the year. Let's say they're going to divide it by quarters. They're going to see if you're actually progressing. So all the students are going to take this test and see where are they. And they're going to see if they're actually progressing in a manner that is going to project them towards that end goal that is supposed to be met by the end of the year, right? So, for example, and simplistically, is after the first quarter, is the student 25% towards the end goal, right? After the second semester, second quarter, is the person 50% there, and so on. So this is the idea. That's again testing. So it gives you an understanding of where you are. In the context of, for example, bridges or like buildings and other things, right? You're gonna test for the structural integrity, for example, or you're gonna do every year. You're gonna do an emissions test for your car, depending if it's beyond a certain number of years. If it's beyond, if it's less than a certain number of years old, right? So you're gonna do this testing to figure out if you're gonna pass, and if you don't pass, what are the things that need to be done to pass it and stuff like to pass that inspection and so on, right? So it gives you an idea. Also, in other things, like if you have an issue in your car, or in your heating system, for example, in the house or whatever it might be, you're going to do testing to figure out what could be the causes of that. What is the current state of things? So if you are seeing that your outlet is not working, a person is going to come in with a screwdriver looking thing. It has like a little like straight like a conic tip, right? And then he's going to put it in and see if there's any kind of like electricity coming in or not, right? He's going to have a little fuse or like a little bulb that's going to help him determine that. But that's an idea here. Okay, this is working, so let me try something else, right? So this is how they're sort of figuring out where the current state of things are, right? And there's a lot more, obviously. You also have corporate earnings calls, and this is done at the end of a quarter, for example. Whatever the quarter is for that, whatever the fiscal year is for that company, right? Whether it's June to June to June, for example, or if it's January to December, or whatever it is. They have these earning calls that are every quarter essentially, and at the end of the quarter, for example, they're going to say, okay, this is where we are, this is how much money we made, this is how many, this is the earnings per share, this is the amount of money that was made per share that is being that's out there, right? Share of the company. And they're going to have all these metrics and reports they're going to give, right? So this is like a sort of like saying, hey, this is what's going on in the world, right? Or sorry, in the company, this is where it's at. So you'll see that right before the earning calls, especially if the investors are thinking that there's a lot of good news that's about to come, the stock prices are going to go up for that particular stock, right? The stock price is going to go really high up because so many people put in their money. And then what's going to happen is if the reports were good, then the money is going to sort of like the stock price is going to sort of stay up a little bit, right? But if the earning reports were really bad, then a lot of people are going to withdraw their money, and the stock price is going to go down essentially, right? So that's the idea. Is to help people, the investors and the investors are the owners essentially, right? So for them to know what's going on in the company, and then they'll decide if they want to like stay with them or not, right? And again, that decision of what they want to do beyond that is the next step, which is the evaluation of how you're going to go from point A to point B, right? But we're just talking about point A, just the earnings report, and the purpose behind it is to get an idea, a benchmark, or an assessment of where you stand currently. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics sends out, I believe it's the first Friday of every month, they send out a employment situation summary. This is where you get the jobs report, right? So they're going to tell you, for example, this is how many jobs that came in, these are the new jobs, this is how many jobs were lost, whatever it is, right? They're going to give you all those details, and that's again going to impact what the perception of people is relative to the economy. So they're going to be like, okay, the economy is doing good, or the economy is not doing good, and we go from there. I don't know if you guys remember in COVID-19. This was one of the big things that was determining, like it was connected to the stock market in the sense that if the job reports were positive, then there was like an influx of money into the stock market, and many stock prices would rise because more money would come in. But when the bad reports were like released, for example, this is how many jobs are lost and stuff, and the economy therefore looks bad, then the people pull the money out because they're losing confidence in the economy. And this is sort of connected to why President Trump, for example, and others were pushing to try to make the economy look better, just because of that confidence that it'll give the investors. So the stock markets are going to keep afloat, and if the stock markets are afloat, then more money is going to be available to the companies, and those companies are going to then, in theory at least, right, are going to then hire more people, and then the jobs are going to continue, and then like the whole panic is going to go away from the economy. So that's the idea behind that kind of stuff, right? And so if you understood how that process works, it's a lot easier for you to sort of understand the politics behind all of these things and not get overwhelmed or frustrated or polarized by certain things and stuff, right? And then the idea of State of the Union, I forget to mention sorry there, is for the president to come to Congress, for example, and just tell them, hey, this is what we think the American public need, and here's the solutions that I'm proposing, for example, or something, according, something similar to that. So this is again like sort of like a presentation of how the things are right now, right? And how we can, and then the other part where he's mentioning, for example, how we can move forward. That's like again saying, okay, here's where we want to be, right? And here's where we are right now, right? And here's how we're going to get there. Here are some strategies on how to get to from point A to point B. The strategies of how to get from point A to B, we haven't covered that yet, but at least you understand the idea of like, what's the objective of the State of the Union. So I hope that, as you're looking at these kinds of things in society all around you, you're starting to sort of like categorize or sort of like understand what the need is, or why they're even there, why those things are being utilized in different contexts, right? And then also for annual reviews, that is at the bottom. Um, sorry, um, the annual reviews. I don't know why I said reviews twice. I meant to say annual corporate reviews, for example, or annual employment reviews or whatever. The idea is that what you're doing is you're going to your boss or whoever, and they're assessing, they're evaluating you in this past year. This is what you've done. This is what you haven't done and stuff. And here's what it's looking like if you're going to stay on for another year in terms of if your contract is going to be renewed, if it's a single year contract, for example, or whatever. And for contractors, it would be the same thing. They'll assess, like for example, if you hire somebody to work in your house, let's say you want to change your flooring, for example, then you're gonna give them, like that review, for example. Same thing, or that you're gonna give them like an idea of, okay, I don't like this and stuff, I like this, and that's the assessment, right? But also when you go online, for example, if you want to buy products and stuff, that's exactly what's happening over there too, right? So you're giving feedback. Like if you go to Amazon, you'll see other people's reviews, right? But likewise, if you go to Consumer Reports, for example, you're going to find what other people are saying about these kinds of things like that. And this is the idea is pretty much figuring out if things are actually working or not working, and how they should be updated and stuff. That's the idea of that. So all of these things, and there's so much more that I can get into, but I want to give that time, and then we'll be done. This is the last slide I have before the takeaways. So whatever you guys have thought about in the meantime, you can let me know here. And I'll start like making a list to get you started. but I just want you guys to kind of just pitch in yourselves. With that, inshallah, we'll go ahead and conclude for today, but go ahead and explore more of these. What are other things that you're doing? So you have an idea, and then you can actually give me examples of case studies yourself, right? There's a lot of case studies out there that you can explore, and inshallah, we'll explore some of them next time after we let you guys add more to this list of things that are considered assessments or whatever. Inshallah.
All right.
With that, your takeaway is that to make sure that you evaluate, you're constantly are aware of where you're standing, whether it's in deen, whether it's in dunya, whether it's whatever you're doing. Always know where you're standing, and have a vision of where you want to get to, and then that's going to help you in terms of actually navigating. So that's going to be later on when we talk about that. But next time, inshallah, after this, we're going to go ahead and cover the whatever you come up with, and then we're going to go into the case studies, good and bad, like we did before. Now, one thing, if you guys want, you can email the main email address for ICM, or you can email Sister Tara or the youth committee email. By the way, this program is actually for the entire community. It's not just for the youth. Via the ICM youth is what's going to show up on the the screen and stuff like that. So it's intended for the entire world, for example, or entire for everyone essentially. Right? It's not just for a specific group of people. So yeah, with that, inshallah, we'll go ahead and conclude. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.